Hi, thank you for watching my video. If you haven't checked out my previous videos, please do so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. So as the title says, Atlantis and the domestication of cattle in North Africa. So as I've said in my previous videos, I believe Atlantis is currently in the Republic of Chad, up in the northeast region of Africa. It would have been situated on the banks of Lake Megachad back during the time of the Green Sahara. So if you haven't checked out my previous videos, please do so. And let's continue. Alright, so as I've went over my last video, there's tons of rock carvings in the Sahara region of the desert from the Bovidian time period. So the Bovidian time period is pre 5000 BC, four and a half, 5000 BC. So there are a lot of pictures of animals, and there are more than enough pictures of cows and cattle and people herding and interacting with them, as seen in these two rock carvings. So with Plato, he describes there being vast fields, the plain of Atlas, which I'll cover in another video. He also talks about the center island of Atlantis being an extremely fertile plain, and on the grounds of the Temple of Poseidon are free-ranging bulls. This quote here says there were bulls who had the range of the Temple of Poseidon. He talks about how there's rituals of how the 10 kings have to capture a bull without weapons and sacrifice it to Poseidon. So pretty neat. There's a rock carving here of two bulls, two cows, both wearing collars. Definitely a sign of domestication. These are not wild creatures. So switching over to a herding lifestyle, aside from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, gives the human many benefits, I believe, especially in the evolution. It kind of tips us over into that point where we can control livestock. We do the same to this point, to this day. We control our food supply. It requires farming to feed these cattle. So where would we farm these cattle? Everyone believes that it came from the Fertile Crescent, the Middle East, maybe even the Egyptian area. But I believe that it could have happened in North Africa. We're talking the Green Sahara, before the end of the last ice age, when North Africa, was very green. So let's talk about that a little further. Here's a picture to recap the location. So where I believe Atlantis is, the Arunga crater site, um, right beside what I believe to be Mount Atlas, on the banks of Lake Chad, possibly even as an island on the banks of, well, on an island on Lake Megachad. So you could see that back then, um, 12,000 years ago, the area in the Sahara was very different. Just tons of rivers and marshes and plains, and definitely a lot of green stuff for cows to munch on. So I believe it's a possibility that this could be an area where the first domestication of cattle and potentially other animals took place. Here's a map of potential domestication sites. So the main one being the Fertile Crescent, shown in red, where they believe the first like European cows and the ones that potentially moved into Africa and northern Africa originated, the ones that went into Egypt. Then there's the second mass domestication in the Indus Valley that was worked its way into India and then into the Middle East and then into Southern Africa and Central Africa. And a third proposed theory is to make up the diversity of the bovine population is potentially a domestication occurrence in the western deserts of Egypt. So just the area we're talking about, the area of Atlantis, where the Atlantean people could have potentially domesticated um, these creatures before anyone else. Also, if this wasn't possible, and this isn't just its own event, potentially you take this red bit and you just move it down a little further into the Western Sahara, knowing that we know what we know about the last ice age and how the Green Sahara was a very different place. You can, if people were present in that area in great numbers, it's not too much to think that they could have been the first or around the first to domesticate the cattle, and then Egypt would have adopted this, and then further on the Middle East, or else Middle East then Egypt, depending on who was around first. But it's not too hard to believe. Definitely, if these people, the Atlantean people, were the originators of herding cattle and domesticating cattle, I feel that would be quite noteworthy. And the Egyptians, when they speak of Atlantis being a great civilization, they're not talking about laser beams and flying saucers. They're talking about useful stuff like the domestication of cattle. As you know, a lot of early gods in Egypt are cows, and India cows. So cows were obviously very important to the ancient people. Estimated that the separation between African and European Tuareg ancestors occurred 22,000 to 26,000 years ago, earlier than the Fertile Crescent domestication, and found patterns of population expansion consistent with domestication. So we had Northern Africa in this map. This is a map of what the Mediterranean Ocean, Mediterranean Sea looked like at the levels, the water levels during the last ice age. So we can see that the Northern African plain comes out much further than it does today. There's actually a land bridge that kind of connects Malta to the boot of Italy, and I don't know, Sardinia and Corsica are connected to the mainland. Um, so we could easily see how, if there were herders or just people in general domesticating cattle, or else maybe just cattle on their own, decided to take a walk. But if people were in this area herding cattle and domesticating cattle, I think it's not unlikely that they could have completely crossed the Straits of Gibraltar and crossed into Italy and what would have been like, I guess, Etrusca, and continued to, you know, domesticate and herd animals all through Europe, and that diversify that European genome, as well as move cattle into southern Africa and western Africa and into Egypt and into the Middle East. So, yep, there definitely was space for cattle. So let's take a little look at what kind of cattle we're talking about. So the cows in question that were roaming these areas were definitely no joke. The picture in the middle shows a ancient cow skull compared to a modern day cow skull. The picture on the right shows just a massive skull with a set of horns on it. You can easily see how these people would have worshipped these animals, um, just like the Egyptians did with Apis and Hathor. whichever people were able to domesticate these animals at first must have been very strong, must have been a lot of them, and they must have been quite intelligent. But if you could domesticate these large animals, you would have an abundance of meat. If you were able to drink their milk, um, able to make cheese or yogurt to help digest the milk, definitely a step forward in humans' evolution. Makes life a little easier. All you gotta do is let them eat grass and make sure that they got grass to eat and reap the benefits. The importance of domesticating animals for the purpose of human gain, um, the benefits of that are obvious. They go without being said, but just a quote here from one of the studies that I'll link in the description. Cattle provide humans with food, hides, and draft power for farming, transport, and construction. Animal husbandry and food production may have contributed to the first uneven divisions of labor within early human societies. So that's interesting to think of. It's kind of like the haves and have-nots. If you got cattle, you're probably a big shot. If you're working the fields to feed said cattle, you're probably lower on the totem pole or the caste system or whatever it may be. But just to think about it though, how important that is. So with cattle, you have food. You never have to worry about being hungry as long as you can feed those cows. You have hides for clothes, for boats, for anything you need, armament, shields, anything like that, for carrying water. Leather's great. So draft power for farming, so hooking your cattle up to plows, making that ground, helping it fertile, be so fertile, breaking it up, planting of crops. That was a huge evolutionary advantage. If that could have potentially happened in the Green Sahara and then moved to the Middle East, that would definitely explain Atlantis being a great civilization. And the transport and construction, so just using cows for pulling stuff and chariots and things like that with horses, animal husbandry in general, so they could have had pigs and other things and sheep as well. But again, if Atlantis, the Atlantean people could have harvested this natural resource and with the abundance of what would probably in the animals that were probably already in the area naturally, probably been in the area for like 250,000 years plus. Um, I think that would have been great. Oh, these animals have clearly had a extremely large impact on humans over time. Um, and the only thing we really have to go off, seeing as how the area in question, Atlantis, has no written records. Let's go from the Egyptians, who are pretty well their next door neighbors, and see like their very oldest gods, Apis, and the god they worship all the time. The embodiment was a bull, a white bull with a bunch of different markings, but nonetheless a bull with large horns, sun disk in the middle of his head. You can see the similarities between the two. Just interesting to think of the bull, the person there that is suckling from the I guess not a bull, but you get the idea. From the teat is supposed to be the embodiment of Egypt, so that just symbolizes how important the bull is to their society and their spiritual well-being. Pretty interesting. So I hope this was a little bit informative. Um, just kind of wanted to point out that if the area, the Green Sahara, is the home of the Atlantean people, that it's not so far off to see why they were great. If they could have domesticated cattle in the Green Sahara on the plain of Atlas, and pretty well invented farming as we know it, and invented herding culture, and then brought that herding culture into Egypt, and then into the Middle East, and then further afield, and maybe even into Europe, over a land bridge through the Mediterranean. That would be extremely significant, and I believe the Atlantean people would have a reason to still be remembered today. Um, Plato describes them as a great culture. The Egyptians describe them as a great culture. This would have been an extremely great thing to give the world. One last quote from the study that I'll post in the description. So far, we can tell that herding spread via complex, multi-step process. The first step involved a ghost population, one for which we do not have direct genetic evidence yet. These people drew about half of their ancestry from groups who lived in either the Middle East or presumably northeastern Africa. So obviously, I believe those people were northeastern African people, the Atlantean people, the Atlantean civilization, their capital being Atlantis. Um, and I believe that they were the first to domesticate animals and push them further on into the Middle East and then Europe and the rest of the world. Um, so thank you for watching my video. If you haven't done so, please check out my other videos. I'm just trying to see if anyone's interested in this location and that I believe to be Atlantis, and if, try and find some good conversation potentially. So the next video, as you can see in the picture here, there's a rock carving of a horse. So Plato's got some interesting things to say about horses in the land of Atlantis. So I'm gonna go over that in my next video. So thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye now.